Hello, dear friends. Shavuot Tov. I'd actually like to tell a story which happened on the Friday night before Shavuot, and it's all about the Shavuot festival, which is, I guess you might say, Jewish Pentecost. Um, so we were sitting at dinner, a friend of mine's house, um, French psychiatrist, and he turned to me towards the end of the meal. It was Friday night a week ago. He said, so how are we supposed to understand the revelation at Sinai when God spoke the Decalogue to the people of Israel? What is that supposed to mean to us today? So I turned to him, I said, well, what do you mean? Are you talking philosophically, historically? Trying to understand what exactly he meant by that. Then he decided, okay, I have a better idea. Let's go around the table and see what people have to say. I said, fine, maybe by then I'll come up with what I want to say. So first he turns to one fellow who was a poet from the United States. And the guy says, well, it seems to me that not only do we have difficulty maybe understanding what it means to have a revelation at Sinai to the whole people, but it could be the people who lived then, 3,000 years ago, who stood at Sinai. Maybe they also didn't 100% understand what happened to them because they weren't seasoned prophets. This was a first time and some of them a one-time experience. Maybe they also had difficulty understanding what had just happened. After all, they did run away after the second utterance. And then the second one, then he turns to the second person who was a French immigrant to Israel, said, well, it seems to me that the problem at Sinai for these people, meaning from our ancestors for 3,500 years ago, is at that moment, the revelation at Sinai was God showing them the reality of what this world really is. That could be scary. Seeing all of a sudden what the world actually looks like from God's point of view, that could be quite shocking experience. And therefore, I understand why they ran away from Sinai after the second, out of fear, out of the second utterance of the Ten Commandments. And then the third one says, well, if you're asking me about the revelation at Sinai, since it happened to me 4 years ago, it means something a little bit different. And they said, what do you mean it happened to you 4 years ago? So she said, well, I converted to Judaism 4 years ago. So for me, the revelation at Sinai with the commandments, it started 4 years ago, so, which I thought was also very interesting. Anyhow, after we went around around the table, so I said to my host, I said, okay, I have something I want to say. And what I said was, in Kabbalistic literature, and in a certain extent, Midrashic literature as well, you have three watershed movements, or three watershed moments, I would say, or three fractures within reality from a Kabbalistic point of view. One of them is the very creation of the universe on day one. This is in the Midrash too. The rabbinic homiletics, the Midrash says that the light that was created on day one of creation was a light which was an unusual light. Person could look through that light and see from one side of the universe to the other. The Midrash continues by saying in Midrash Rabbah that God saw that this light was not something which the world deserves, and therefore he hid the light for the righteous in futuristic times. What does that mean? God creates a light and then takes it away because the world wasn't ready for it. And then instead of having a perfect world with this unusual light, we have the lights on the fourth day, sun and the moon and the stars. But obviously, as Lutzat or Ramchal says, there's an idea here. We had a perfect world, and God purposely makes the perfect world imperfect before he creates human beings. So it's nobody's fault. There weren't any human beings around to sin. But God obviously realizes that mankind cannot live in a perfect world. We need an imperfect world to perfect, so that this world now becomes something that we did, that we share in its promotion, in its completion. As it says, Adam and Eve were put in the garden, le'ovda u'l'shomra, to work in the garden and to watch over it. So the first fracture or watershed moment is when the world goes from perfection to imperfection in order to allow human beings to live in the world. The second fracture or the second watershed moment is in the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve are in the garden. First it's Adam, and then there's a separation done, or as it seems to imply, taking one of his ribs, but the Midrash says it was a separation. And then you have Adam and Eve in the garden, and they are told to complete the garden, to work in the garden, and to watch over the garden. And therefore they are going to complete the world that God created as an imperfect world. And that's basically their job. So you have Adam and Eve, who are the seed of all mankind, they're like the microcosm of all of mankind, in this Garden of Eden, which is the microcosm or the seed of reality. And anything that happens in the seed is going to affect the tree, which will grow out of it. And God says you can eat from any one of the trees, but there's one tree, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that you shouldn't eat from. But of course they do, that one tree. And God knows in advance, says the Ari and Ramchal, that they're going to eat from that tree. And therefore they have to be banished from the garden. Before I continue, what happens is Adam and Eve are put into a situation in the Garden of Eden, which is they're beyond their ability to live in this situation. It's a situation in which they're in the garden and they can hear God as if walking in the garden with them. But they're not yet on the level to live in such a reality. So their sin is something which is evidently going to happen, because they're not ready for that situation, and then they are banished. So the second fracture is also something that was known in advance that it had to happen that way. But if you have two fractures, that it was known in advance that it was a necessity, the first one, because mankind can't live in a perfect world, and the second one, because Adam and Eve were not even ready for the Garden of Eden yet, why put them there? Well, the reason why you need the perfect world before the imperfect world is there has to be an impression left over of what the goal is in order to achieve it. By having a perfect world first, you leave this ideal, this impression within reality. By putting Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, even though they're not ready for it, it's a historical necessity that they know in their subconscious what they are striving for. The next watershed moment, or let's call it fracture 3, is Sinai. Now, Sinai was supposed to be the remedy. It was supposed to be a point of healing for a fractured world. And the people of Israel are taken out of Egypt and out of bondage, and God saves them from the Egyptians and is taking them towards the land, and on the way they come to Sinai. And at Sinai, God introduces them to the law, to what they're going to have to know in order to be a people with a light unto the nations. And first, it's just the Decalogue. It's an oral reciting of the Decalogue, which is what happened at Sinai. And the people listen to the word of God, but they're obviously not ready. And they run away after the second Diber. How do we know that? Well, first of all, it says so in Deuteronomy chapter 5. But also, you can see it from the Decalogue itself. I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt. In third person, that means God is speaking. Number 2, you shall not have any gods besides me. Excuse me, in first person. I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt. So God is talking. You shall not have any gods besides me. It's also in first person. So God's speaking. The third one, what we call commandment, but let's say of the Decalogue, third utterance of the Decalogue, don't take God's name in vain. Third person, Moses is speaking. Why? Because we know that the people ran away after the second diber, after the second utterance, or after the second statement of God. And Moses became the middleman. Anochi omed ben Hashem u'benechem. I stood between you and God on that day. The people were afraid and ran away, as it says in Deuteronomy chapter 5. So they weren't ready. And because they weren't ready, 40 days later, and Moses is supposed to come down with the tablets and does come down, but he only comes at the end of the day. People get nervous. 40 days have gone by. Where is Moses? He disappeared. And a group comes up with the idea of the golden calf. And the rest of the people are an accomplice because of their silence. We know they didn't bow to the golden calf because when Moses sees it, he says to the tribe of Levi, of the Levites, says, go kill anybody who worshiped the golden calf. And it was 3,000 people. Now, that's a lot of people. But if you realize how many Israelites there were who left Egypt, you understand that it's a small percentage. We know from the book of Numbers that we're now reading Bamidbar, there were between the ages of males, between the ages of 20 and 60, there were over 600,000. Add to that the children and the women, you have to at least double that number. So that leaves you with 1.2 million. Not only that, but it's only doubling it by the women. That would be 1.2 million. Adding the children, you're probably at about 1.5 million, 1.6 million. Add to that the mixed multitude. So we might even be 1.8 million. So 3,000 was not a lot, but the rest were complicit in the fact that they, in their silence, they just watched to see maybe there's something to it. Remember, they had lived in Egyptian society for generations, and that's the way the Egyptians worship. So they watched to see if something was going to happen. Rashi claims it was the mixed multitude who were the ones who were the instigators. Whatever happened, it was 3,000. But even so, and they're being complicit and not doing anything was considered a very grave sin. And the Torah says, "B'yom pukti ufakadati alechem," that over the generation, we are absolved of that sin little by little, historically. So there was a necessity that the Jewish people be at Sinai to have this contact with God, even if they weren't ready for it. This is the third time where you have this necessity. And so even though they were on a very high level and they received these special crowns, as it says in the book of Shemot, in Exodus, which they had to give back after the sin of the golden calf. But they had to reach that level for a moment for it to be ingrained within our collective soul so that we know where we're coming back to. So 3 times we have this fracture. The first one was to the universe at large, the world at large, even before they were human beings. The second one was to mankind through Adam and Eve. And the third one was the Jewish people at Sinai who had a chance of rectifying the situation, but were not ready. And then 3 times we were not ready yet. But these things had to be implanted in our subconscious collective soul in order for us to know which way we are going. Now back to the festival of Shavuot, which we call the giving of the Torah, Matan Toratenu. Now the Torah wasn't given on Shavuot. What happened on Shavuot was God spoke the Decalogue to the people of Israel. Nothing was given aside from that. But what is the Torah if not the interface with God, the interface with the Word of God? So if we can actually hear the Word of God standing at Sinai, that is the Torah, that's the goal. That's why Shavuot is called Zman Matan Toratenu, because that's the whole goal of the Torah, to have this connection with the Word of God. Now, Shavuot is called Zman Matan Toratenu, the time of the giving of the Torah. not the time of the receiving of the Torah. It's not Zman Kabbalat HaTorah, because God gives the Torah, but every individual has to decide in their own time how and when they receive the Torah. That's already the leap of faith that each individual has to take. So that happens at different times in our lifetime. And therefore, it's the giving of the Torah on Shavuot, but the receiving of the Torah is how every individual understands and receives the Torah themselves, and if not themselves, their children or a coming generation. So there's the giving of the Torah, and there is the receiving of the Torah. So this was an idea I wanted to say about Zman Matan Toratenu, and I say to everybody, Shalom, Shalom, Shavua Tov, have a good week.